It's Friday, and I'm back with the next in the Fanzine Friday series. Today we take a look at a new publication. This is called The Apprentice from 1978. Please stick around. I'm AZ Mountaineer. This is our channel, Old School Rules, where we celebrate the community of old school gamers and grognards who like classic RPGs, miniatures, magazines, and everything that goes with it. Each week on the Fanzine Friday series, I take a fanzine from my collection off the shelf for a closer look. Today, that's The Apprentice, #1 from 1978. Hope you enjoy the video. Okay, folks, so let us set our Wayback Machine all the way to May of 1978, and let's head to the Great White North of Canada for this new series of fanzines. This is The Apprentice, produced by David Berman, and it's I think it's more square, so maybe legal size paper folded in half, slightly, ever so slightly heavy stock cover paper on the front here, which is blue, and then the inside's white, folded in half and stapled through the middle. I'm really excited to do The Apprentice. It's a fun fanzine. It's a famous, maybe infamous, you might say, in the history of RPGs, and we're going to talk about that a little bit here today. So here's our cover. The artist's name is Bruce White. He also designs the little Apprentice icon or logo that's up here at the top. Here's our table of contents. There's a little bit of an editorial where he introduces the magazine and tells you what it's all about. Heir of CalQuest is some fantasy fiction. It's pretty decent. It drew me in. It's a small main character who meets a great big 6'6" burly character. Reminds me a little bit of Fawford and the Grey Mouser. I think might have been his inspiration, but I was interested in the story. I wanted to see where it's going to go, so that's going to hopefully continue, in future issues of the fanzine. Scribes and Scrolls is his review, which we'll talk briefly about his review, which is of Chivalry and Sorcery. Spear Thrust is a new combat system by Richard Best. Galadriel's Mirror is upcoming conventions and discussions of new products, and so that'll be a little bit of historical interest. Halls of the Leprechaun King is the main adventure this time around. Orbs and Artifacts are new magical items. Monster Madness, new monsters. The Sorcerer Apprentice is just his comments on nuts and bolts of running your role-playing game. So there's just some his thoughts here, and he talks about some fanzines, which we'll mention when we get there. The Fantasy Forum is a discussion about a topic, and this time it's super monsters and super magic. So basically, keeping your campaign from getting sort of too Monty Hall or over the top. New Excavations is a forum for dungeon rules, and so he's got one here, a new idea about searching for treasure. And then the Campaign Trail is his idea of new concepts, and here he has an idea for a calendar for use in your fantasy campaign. And finally, Classified Information is things that are for sale and attempts to connect people to each other. His in terms of contributions, David Berman, who's the editor and producer of the fanzine, does most of the work. Jason Byers does the fantasy fiction, and Richard Best has this combat system. And then the other folks here are given artist credit, and we'll mention them when we get to their art. We're starting with Renee Steinberger, Bruce White, Jacqueline Rook, Keith Burnage, Reva Berman, and Diana Dufour. Okay, so why do I say this is a famous? Well, the Gary Gygax, I think, took umbrage with comments made in The Apprentice #2, and that's the one out of their 6 of these. That's the one I don't have, so I won't be able to do that. So I want to go and talk about this now. It's also why The Apprentice is so collectible, and why #2 is particularly so hard to find. So he writes not only this one column, but on the next page a second column and the start of a third column, all railing against The Apprentice, and in particular focused in on stuff he said or wrote in #2. And then he talks about it briefly for another fanzine called The Phoenix, and it was even worse in his opinion. This is sort of, I mean, Gary's sort of the legend. He's the great creator of Dungeons and Dragons along with Dave Arneson. But for him to get so frosty about this little fanzine from Canada that he wants to tear into him, so this is worth reading, I think, because it's so entertaining. There's an old axiom which says one can determine the curse struck by its yapping after throwing a stone into a pack of dogs. I don't know what that means, but it's colorful. Both of these amateur magazines show definite signs of doing quite a bit of such yapping, possibly due to a past editorial regarding the worthlessness of such publications. Rather than disproving the assertions about the shabby quality and lack of worthwhile material, typically found in fanzines Gary had written, however, Apprentice and Phoenix serve to justify my assertions that such magazines are a waste of the reader's money and time. Consider the following. Apprentice, publisher, editor, etc., Dave Berman, is a reasonable, well-printed offset 20-page magazine plus cover. Sells for $1. If its contents were intelligent, it would possibly be worth the price. They are not, and it is not. Here are a few choice excerpts which typify what is probably the most unintentionally funny amateur effort at journalism to date in the annals of the gaming hobby. In the inside front cover editorial entitled The Apprentice Speaks, Berman tells his readership from now on he will refer to games such as Dungeons & Dragons genre as MFRP, I believe that's medieval fantasy role-playing, or FRP. Make of that what you will. I wonder if he calls the Rings trilogy MF. The next hilarious sally into the realms of properly reserved for the literate is another gem by Mr. Berman, a review of TSR's The Dragon. And he goes on because he says, on the one hand, he says the Dragon's not that good, but then he praises some of the things that were written in the Dragon magazine, that particular episode. Which, of course, Gary takes issue with all that and really goes after him. And he says, so one of the things that he mentioned was that, maybe the Dragon is in trouble because it's asking for contributions. And of course, Gary says, no, we're willing to take contributions. We have plenty of talent. And by the way, we have plenty of submissions that come in every month, unlike you guys. He says, no plea was ever made to the bulk of contributors to Amateur Press Association publications or amateur magazines because the caliber of writing therein is so far beneath the worst of that seen in publications such as White Dwarf and Dragon as to give critical reviewers of actual merit something to complain about. He goes on and on. I think it's fantastic that Gary took the time to just share what he thought. He's the head of, at this point, he's the head of TSR. And he took time out of his busy day to write this out, so he was clearly not happy. Okay, so here, this is their table of contents. I only put it here to share with you the artwork here. This is Keith Burnage, who did this little dude about to get chopped in half by an axe. All right. So Scribes and Scrolls is his review of Chivalry and Sorcery, and he really likes it. And goes on to say, talks about the realism of it. Now he does say, and I think in fairness, if you're not discouraged by the 5 words to the inch typing the 150 lines per page and the bulk of this 130-page volume, you will marvel at the detail and comprehensiveness of the rulebook. So he sort of says, look, if you wanted that because you thought Dungeons and Dragons was lacking, then the Chivalry and Sorcery is the book for you. And he also says, but if you don't want to get buried in that, you don't have to read it 5 times to try and learn all these rules and complexities, then you may not enjoy Chivalry and Sorcery. Then we have a new combat system by Richard Best. He's idea is interesting. He has a whole new way of calculating this. You basically start out with your dexterity, add 10. Here we go, right, with the math. Minus your encumbrance, your armor, weapon, and wound values, which he has set charts for. Then you get a dexterity conversion chart, so based on your dexterity score, you get a base chance to hit, which, as he says, is only contact, not damage. And so then you got weapon attack modifiers, which you can strike better in the first round, and then over time your strike ability gets worse. I think he basically was trying to take into context if you had a heavy weapon, I guess maybe you'd get tired of swinging it more quickly. Then the opponent has a quickness rating that they use. It's subtracting the base number, And then you have a circumstance chart, such as like, prone, attacking from the rear, etc. Then you roll 2 6-sided dice and you see if you hit. I mean, this, sounds pretty complicated. And here you can sort of see the charts and everything you've got to do. Every 20 pounds of weight for encumbrance. As you get wounded over time, every quarter of your hit points that are lost, you take a minus. You got to, again, I didn't like Chivalry and Sorcery's complexity. He did, and so I'm sure he's in favor of this type of game chart. I'm not. I like Dungeons & Dragons. It's not realistic. There's lots of things you could do to try and make it more realistic, but I like the simplicity and the speed of it. Goodness knows when we play, combat seems to take forever anyway. Galadriel's Mirror. Let's talk about conventions. I think the historical notes are interesting. PinCon 78, Origins 78 in Michigan. PinCon's in Widener, outside of Philly, more or less. Gen Con 11, and with something called MapleCon, which is a science fiction convention in Canada. New products hitting the market: Thieves of Bada Bascore, which is Judges Guild, one of the earliest. Pellet Quest Play by Mail, the Monster Manual's coming out. Stellar Wars is being produced by Fantasy and Hobby, and then All the World's Monsters Volume 2 has just come out from Chaosium. This is the adventure, which he says is the key part of his fanzine. I don't give it a great grade. It's built around a leprechaun who is hiding and has made a lair underground. True to that concept, there's a lot of magic and I'd say tricks more than traps. There's a lot of teleportation you have to do to move around within the structure. It can be, from my read of this, it feels like it could be very confusing, very frustrating. I don't know that a party would particularly enjoy this. It would be something completely different, for sure, than any dungeon I think they've probably been through before. They might just not ever want to come back and play this one again, that's for sure. But anyway, so you try to make your way down to find him in his lair at the very end. And anyway, here is the cross section. There's a stone house at the top, and you go down a ladder, and then you start through these, like, as you can see from the cross section, these things aren't connected because you have to use teleportation portals to jump between the different sections of the adventure. I think this would definitely be a one-evening campaign. Here are his new magic items. They're called Finnegan sticks. Finnegan is his head leprechaun from the adventure, and he makes these random little sticks that are imbued with magic. He has a chart 1 through 150, and they're super slick, and so basically when you touch one, there's a 1 in 6 chance you'll drop it anytime you try to handle it. So you just have to be really attentive as a dungeon master. Every time it's handed or picked up, handed to somebody, put into a backpack, out of a backpack, you would roll to see if they drop it. And then a random thing happens. It could be a spell goes off, a monster appears, a henchman is summoned to help you, changes something about you, bonuses or minuses to a stat, change your class, change your sex, change your race. It just goes on and on. So it's very good for being a leprechaun item, right? Because it's completely chaotic, sort of random magic. His new monster is the leprechaun. He doesn't really give it any stats like we normally would, other than he gives it the 6 base stats like you would a character, but he doesn't stat it like you would a monster in the monster manual for whatever reason. And basically because he says they're not going to fight, they're just going to try and get away, and they're little tiny, 2 foot tall creatures. Here are the Sorcerer's Apprentice, Necessities Publications. So he wants to tell you about what he thinks you need to get to know. And he says basically for the game, you should buy the box set and the supplements. Remember, this is the original wood grain or white box set, right? Before Holmes, before Moldvay, before Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. He says don't buy the Holmes Basic because you're going to level through, because it only goes level 3. You're going to level through that very quickly, and you're going to need these books so you can keep going up in levels. You could try and hold out and see what this Advanced Dungeons & Dragons thing is all about. But from him, he said, I don't have the patience for it, so for now, buy the original box. Man, if you took his advice and you had those original books, you'd be in good shape, because those are pretty collectible now. He also says, for him, he loves Chivalry and Sorcery. He loves the detail. He thinks you should buy it. But he says, if you don't want that, then obviously you're not going to enjoy it. He says you have to get the Dragon magazine. I don't know that this is quite the tack they took. He says every single word in that magazine is canon, essentially, right? And so you have to, it's official word. So you have to have it so you know, because it's expanding the rules and changing the rules. I think most of the stuff in the Dragon, frankly, they said was not official unless they said it was official. And most of it they didn't say that about. Nonetheless, I think he's right. If you love the hobby, especially back then in the 70s, you'd want to have the Dragon magazine every month. Frankly, you'd want to get the White Dwarf every month if you could get it from the United Kingdom, but I'm not sure that you could. But anyway, so he says you need to get those. But then he also talks about some fanzines, so you know I love that. The Dungeoneer, which we've done videos on, it's fantastic. Alarms and Excursions, Wild Hunt, both APA style fanzines, one in California, one out I think in Boston, here in the UK, or here in the United States. He mentions the White Dwarf, and then he says over there they have Troll Crusher, which is an APA styled fanzine, but smaller. Then also News from Bree, Spellbound, The Underworld Oracle, Quick Quincy Gazette, and of course The Apprentice. And we have done a series of fanzine videos on all those except Quick Quincy Gazette. I'm still trying to acquire those. If you know anybody who has a Quick Quincy Gazette, send them my way. I'd love to read those. All right. Ideas on campaigning and running your campaign. He basically says, I've seen this tendency where people, they've designed these hard dungeons, characters are dying, so that they don't die, you start giving them more magic and more stuff so they can level up faster, and then you get these super powerful characters. And he says, I don't like that. You know, be smarter about how you run your campaign. Adjust your dungeon, adjust your traps, adjust the number of monsters, etc. So characters don't maybe die at quite the same pace. Again, I think that was part of the early campaign, and I certainly agree with him. The dungeon master needs to be tuning the campaign rather than creating this super, rocket ship of level gains and magic gains. That's not going to be fun for anybody. Okay, then Renee Steinberger Bergen has this really good article, and the idea is there. I don't know the execution is quite what I would do, but the idea is finding items. And so you start how concealed it is. She uses a 1 to 6 scale. 1 is out in the open, partially exposed, concealed, secret panels or doors, fake backs to a fireplace or shifting walls, or buried or built into a wall. That'd be a 6. And then she said, how much are they searching? 1 is 1 to 6. 1 to 5. 1 is just like automatic, you're looking around the room. 2 is you say, I'm going to take a look for about 30 seconds, 10 feet a minute, or 10 feet taking a minute, 10 feet taking 3 minutes, 10 feet area start taking 5 minutes, right? So how thorough you guys want to search. And you put that into a matrix, and then you've got a percentage chance of discovery. So the idea is pretty good there. Probably an improvement over the rules or lack of rules you had in Dungeons & Dragons to start with. They also give thieves 5% per level, up to a maximum 50% bonus. I like that a lot. It's giving a little bonus as thieves. They know how to hide stuff, so they would know how to look for things that are hidden, I think. This one is, I guess it's okay. He's created a calendar with months and days of the week. For whatever reason, he's got these randomly named months, and he's got 9 days of the week. So there you go. They have in the very first issue, they have sold an ad, so that was kind of good. And then they've got this artwork here on the back. Jacqueline Rook did the drawing. It says she did the drawing and Richard Best did the inking. I'm not really sure. Maybe she drew it in pencil and he inked over it. I don't know. But anyway, that's a clever little piece of artwork. So that's it for the first issue of The Apprentice, a fantastic and quite famous / infamous fanzine from Canada, the first from Canada, he says, and I think he's correct about that. There are 6 of these in total. I have all of them except for number 2, so we'll probably jump to number 3 next week and take a look at those in the weeks ahead. Hope you guys are enjoying the series. We obviously have a lot of fanzine videos. We have some other videos on our channel. I hope if you enjoyed the videos, you'll subscribe and send your friends who might like this content here so they might be interested in subscribing as well. That's it. Have a great weekend. Roll some dice with your friends, and until next time, keep rolling 20s.